Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Doom Patrol as well as the season premiere of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Like always, if I'm talking about something that you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time to start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I said about this week's episode of Doom Patrol, you can skip to what I had to say about the season premiere of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Doom Patrol. Another great episode. A lot of interesting things went down. We finally get introduced to Flex Mentallo and kind of understand what his powers are. Very interesting powers. Essentially, when he flexes his muscles, it's almost like basically creates these vibrations that affect things around him. It almost seems like he can basically bend everything to kind of his will. So I think it seems like he might be kind of like the perfect match for Mr. Nobody, considering the fact that he can kind of bend things the way he does. It's almost probably like on the same level. Probably whether it's quite as strong as Mr. Nobody bending reality, it's hard to say at this point in time because we haven't really fully seen what Flex is capable of. But it turns out it's kind of interesting. Like, it didn't click on my head even seeing him realizing, I guess because of all the facial hair and the long hair, that's 722 in the ant farm, and that's kind of interesting. Luckily, we find out that Silas is still alive. I was like, that would suck just after everything, but it's like, no, luckily he's still alive. And then I love you have Cliff being like, get us out of here, Jane, get Flint out here so she can like teleport us away. But it's like, it doesn't work like that. It's like, come on, we're kind of screwed if we don't. It's also interesting to see that, Darren Jones is still alive, that bastard, it looks like the Butts didn't do necessarily their job. I am still curious about the whole situation of all the people that escaped, like what that really entailed. I was actually kind of curious where we're going to find out that Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man, Steve, was there the entire time, but it turns out not to be the case because he was obviously, I forgot, he had the whole robbery thing. So I guess he's in the public spotlight. So the Bureau of Normalcy just couldn't come and snatch him up if they wanted to. There's too many eyes on him and everything, which is kind of interesting. I guess this situation is a little more different than a Cyborg situation since you were able to kind of snatch a celebrity like him. That was, like I brought up last episode, that being a whole thing. But nevertheless, I like how that whole situation played out. Like someone who works for Fuchs, or at least kind of believed in everything he did, tried to kill him, but luckily for Steve, he got shot in all the mineral bits. So that was interesting. It's just like, I love that character and everything associated with him is just such a background thing. I love it, which is so interesting considering the fact is he was there kind of in the forefront of like one episode. I mean, he wasn't like the biggest part, but he was part of an episode. And now every time you see him, he's always in the background of like, oh yeah, this thing happened to Animal, Vegetable, Mineral Man, so it's just kind of interesting to break that down. But nevertheless, they return with Flex. But Flex doesn't remember who he is because he was kind of broken down to just be like, I'm 722. That's all I am. That's all who I am. I don't know who this Flex Mentallo guy is. And you have Jane and Cliff trying to break him down to the point of trying to unlock who he is, trying to make him remember. Trying like a variety of tactics, like cutting his hair and everything, shaving him, and being like, oh yeah, look. And he's like, oh no, I don't think that Flex dude is me necessarily, even though he looks like him. It's just, like I said, he's just so, in his head is so disconnected, like, there's no way that guy is me. And, he kind of lost his identity. And then you had Jane suggesting that Cliff kind of mess with him a little bit, because it's like, he got super pissed when you were talking to him during his TV show. And I love him, Cliff being like, oh man, this TV show is so bad. Was it always this bad? I gotta also talk about the fact is I love it, like, where they're like, wait, the chief? It's like, yeah, his evil twin brother, Nick. I was like, wait, what? I was like, whoa, I was like, he's talking about the soap opera, isn't it? And lo and behold, he is, because Jane figured it out. I also love it because Cliff also points out the fact is he was actually in one episode of it that was actually playing himself. I thought that was pretty good. I was like, that's so interesting, because I love it later on because Larry and Jane both kind of poke fun at the fact is that he was in it. He's always been like, there was buzz about me getting a daytime Emmy for it. And I love we see him and he's like, why? It's so good and cheesy and dumb. I love it. That's so good. But getting back to it, the whole like getting in front of the TV and talking over it, and he's like, shh. And then Cliff breaks the TV and then puts his hands up like, okay, ready to fight, trying to get him to use his superpowers. And it looks like he's about to get pissed, but then he starts weeping, and you have Jane and Cliff being like, what the hell is going on here? I love that. I also can't forget about the fact is when it was all said and done, Cliff is like, come on guys, we got to celebrate. We won. And Jane had to remind, it's like, Vic, literally almost beat his dad half to death. It's like, yes, that's terrible, but it shouldn't take away from our accomplishment. We rescued a superheroes. Us, the fuck-ups. We did that. And we found Flex Mentallo. It's like, come on, guys, we should be celebrating. He's clapping, and Flex is clapping too. Like, yeah. I love the whole situation. Sadly, Jane's plan didn't work. And so it was kind of interesting because there was also like a little resolution between Jane and Cliff, because obviously Jane's kind of pissed at Cliff because Cliff keeps wanting to talk about the underground. It's like, that's my thing. Don't talk about my thing. It's just kind of a reminder, like he was rummaging through her head or just everything that is her. So it's like, it almost like this violation. So she doesn't like that. It's like, I don't want you to talk about something that you don't really understand. This is my thing. It's not your thing. It has nothing to do with you. But he ends up apologizing later on because he's like, because at first he's like, you should kind of sympathize with Flex, kind of like having, a whole bunch, going wrong with your head and everything, like your whole situation, you should be sympathetic. And she's like, I'm gonna tell you this one last time, this has nothing to do with me or the underground, so just stop talking about it. But he does apologize. He goes, truth be told, he's like, I'm sorry. I should say that. Like, the fact of the matter is, I saw some stuff in there you didn't want me to see. Some of that stuff was not meant for me to see, and that wasn't cool that I saw it, And he's basically trying to tell her, like, that it's okay, that the fact is that if she ever needs to talk about it, and he's like, I'm here, and she's like, I'm not going to want to talk about it, and he puts his hand on her shoulder, and you kind of see Jane almost kind of like, because I was curious, like, whether her and Cliff were good. It seemed like they were potentially good after the episode that they had and everything, but I think it's just this kind of, because he saw that vulnerable side. He saw a lot of stuff he shouldn't have done, not just about the other, personality, the other personas, but rather, like, stuff about Kay, her dad, that whole thing. Like, she saw a vulnerable side of him, and I think for her, she was like, keeping her guard up a little bit. But I think this kind of because she was kind of letting her guard down a little bit around Cliff before, and now I think she's letting it happen again. And I think, I don't know, it was just kind of fascinating, and I thought that was kind of a nice, development between their characters. There's Larry and the Spirit. It turns out like Larry had the opportunity to get out sooner because actually he was there. He was actually in the same room that Cyborg is in. That's why he was like 722. It's like because he recognized him because they were roommates back in the day. Like Flex was there around the time Larry was all those decades ago. And so for Larry, because he was in this suit to kind of contain his radiation and stuff like that, which I guess maybe it's because the fact he's around other people, but I guess like the radiation has waned over the years. Like that was still around the time the radiation was still fresh on his body. So I guess like now, or maybe it's something that they did to him, but eventually I think the radiation kind of finally died down over the years, so it's no longer an issue. Because I'm about to say he's around normal people all the time. I was like, maybe I can make an exception with everyone around him because they're all kind of superheroes and stuff like that. So maybe they just have superpowers and stuff like that. They're kind of metahumans, so it's like maybe that kind of prevents them from being affected by his radiation. But I think maybe it's just, but then I'm like, no, he's around other people too. Not unless there's something special about his bandages. Maybe they operate in the same way. I mean, to be fair, he was rescued by Niles, so maybe Niles kind of hooked him up with some bandages that could potentially help with that. I mean, to be fair, he's never like unbandaged, so maybe the bandages keep him wrapped tight enough that the radiation doesn't leak through, but I still feel like that would leak through bandages. So those are either not normal bandages or, like I said, it died down. Like, I think it takes a long ass time, but radiation does eventually start to die down. And like I said, it just takes a while. So, but to be fair, I don't know what the half-life of radiation is. Like I said, that's getting into territory I'm not well versed in. But nevertheless, like the Spirit makes Larry realized, like, because at the time he was like, I can't go, like, because Flex is like, oh, help me, and he's like, basically, and also interestingly enough, he can communicate with the Spirit. And that's kind of adding these different levels to it, because remember, he was able to hear Mr. Nobody kind of messing with Cyborg's head when he's using the fake grid and everything, and it's like, oh, it's like, yeah, didn't you hear him? He said he didn't want that, and Cyborg's like, wait, you can hear that? And it's like, how could you? And he's like, don't worry, can we talk about this some other time? And now being able to see that he could also understand the Spirit, I guess because of his muscles flexing, like because of the vibrations that his muscles kind of emit, it kind of gives him a situation where he can hear stuff. Like I said, it's almost like a reality. Like he kind of, because his powers kind of work on a certain frequency that I think like Mr. Nobody as well as the Spirit kind of operate on different frequencies, and maybe he can kind of shift out with the vibrations. He's able to like shift and change when he like flexes his muscle. But either way, I thought that was kind of fascinating. But Larry was too afraid to leave for multiple reasons. I think for one, it's like, It's like, oh, I can't get out of here. Like if this suit kind of tears in any shape or form, all these people will be exposed. I think that was more, to the radiation from him, but I think it was more so an excuse because for him, he said to himself, like, I don't have anything out there waiting for him. It's like his wife left. He pushed John away. It's like the fact is there's nothing waiting for me out there. So I don't want to leave. It was almost that thing of like, he's so broken down because it's like, I have nothing, I have no one. So why even risk? Why even get my hopes up? Because there's nothing in that world for me. I'm just this weirdo, this freak. So I think that's where he stood. And it's just kind of crazy to think like it took a long time, but to get Larry to where he is now, where he accepts himself, realizing, not cutting himself off necessarily from the world, kind of being more open and even accepting himself, I think that's kind of fascinating because he even feels bad because the spirit, it's like you had a chance to get away, but you couldn't because I wasn't willing to take that chance. I was so caught up in my own situation. He didn't care about what the spirit wanted or needed. It's like, it's this thing inside of me. I don't care about it, but now he does. Even to the point he's starting to die without it, but it's like, no, you go. The fact of the matter is, if it wasn't for me, you would have gotten out a long time ago, but at the very least, I need, maybe I'll die without you, but it's a chance I'm willing to take so that you can have a chance. So go be free. And he's giving it an opportunity to escape. It's actually kind of interesting because it's like, Flex had asked him, it's like, oh, where are you from? Obviously, we don't get to hear that side of the conversation, but it's kind of saying, and he's like, wait, is that like some kind of dimension or something? He's like, yeah, but I can send you back there. So is it from another dimension? It's probably most likely from another planet. Are there other spirits, like entities like it? Like that becomes like the big question and everything. But Larry was willing to let the spirit go because like the bond that they've grown together. But when the time came, it was also interesting, like they were referring to like, oh, he's dying. So I guess that's more so, they were more so referring to Larry and not necessarily the spirit. So that kind of answers my questions too, because he was already dying without the spirit, like the radiation was already starting to wear down. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I totally almost let that slip my mind of like, oh yeah, that was a thing that we're mentioning without the radiate, like the joules amount of radiation he was putting out was starting to go away because I think his body was in a position where it was still fresh alive, but because like probably like it started to decay even more as time went on because he was really more like a walking corpse in a certain sense. He's constantly in a state of dying, and I guess like the longer the spirit's out of him, the more rapidly the death kind of comes upon him, but it gets halted. It makes you wonder, is it like a complete stopper of like, yes, he's close to death. Now, if the spirit ever leaves him for a very, 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 very long period of time, it did like, say like he has like 90 seconds of life left. Every time the spirit leaves him, that clock is still ticking down, or does he go back to like a okay point in time? It makes you wonder like how that whole situation works, because that means like if the spirit leaves him any further going forward, like he'd still go back to being in that condition. To be fair, like it's that thing of like he passes out, but I think because like when the spirit's away from him long enough, he's able to kind of be up and awake, proving that like, it's like the spirit kind of, I guess, puts him in almost a form of stasis to make it so that he won't be dying, but him being awake and active without the spirit is him dying all over again. It was just something interesting I'm sitting here thinking about now, but nevertheless. So that was pretty neat. He had everything with Rita and Cyborg. She's trying to make Cyborg realize that everything's okay, but for him, it's like, I can't take any chances. Because, yes, knowing that Mr. Nobody was messing with my head is one thing, but feeling it is another. Because for him, it's like, how do I, that maybe still on some level there is some truth to it. And Rita kind of does a lot of self-discovery this episode because she's talking to this old man and talks about the fact is, because obviously she's afraid to go against Mr. Nobody as well, because it's like, oh, he's going to use all my stuff against all my mistakes against me. And, and she's afraid of that, just like he used Cyborgs against him. But it took her talking to that old man to kind of obviously admit like what happened. Like we learned a sad truth that she's kind of running from, that basically her need to kind of be in a movie. Like she was a star, and then like the phone stopped ringing less and less. She met up with he's like a producer or something, Gene. And then it's like, oh, he wants some young starlet. So, she made it happen. Like Rita did it over and over, and it was kind of a win-win situation. Gene got what he wanted, the young starlets rose to stardom, and Rita kept getting more and more roles, so it kind of worked out for everyone, which I guess maybe that's also the reason why this episode was kind of, why, her story is the way it is, because I guess, I'm sure that was very prevalent back then, but obviously, it's even a sadder truth that obviously within the Hollywood system of things, obviously with everything that's come out, it's like, it seems that, like, even, yeah, that was something back then, but also it shows, like, it's supposed to be relevant to the fact that it's so prominent now. And so it turned into the situation of Gene got the girl pregnant, Mary Beth, And he didn't want to be a father, so Mary Beth was kind of taking care of it by herself, and she tried to go to Rita for help, but Rita kind of turned her away, gave her $100. It's like, oh, she'll grit up and she'll take care of things, but sadly that wasn't the case. Mary Beth was kind of alone, and she had no one to really rely on, and she ended up killing herself. I kind of figured like something like that might have been Mary Beth's story, but I was thinking the baby situation was something connected to her more directly. I was thinking like maybe it was her own baby that she had given up for stardom. And not necessarily that way, but there's some tidbits to that in the sense of like there was a part of her that felt bad about Mary Beth dying because she blamed herself. It's like, I should have been there for her. So in her grief, she was like, oh, I'll take care of the baby. But when the time came, it's like, oh, she got a leading role in something. And so I was like, nope, that spotlight, it feels so good. It felt warm. Again, you get addicted to it. It's intoxicating, as she said. And because of that, we still never found out whatever did happen to that baby. I guess that baby grew up in the foster system. And I'm curious, is that going to be something relevant? Maybe Rita's going to track the baby down at some point in time and that be kind of part of her story. I don't know. But, for Rita, it's like, because like the movie she got was the movie where the accident happened and turned her into, giving her powers and making her situation the way it is. And it took, now, because for her, it's like she's been holding that guilt for all this all this time. And for her, it's like everything that's happened to me on that movie set, as well as everything after, she's like, I deserved it, and she's been living her life trying to find a way for redemption, essentially. But the guy was kind of like, you've got your power back, because I think for her, this is her chance, kind of facing up to her mistakes. And it's like, now Mr. Nobody has no power over me. She's even trying to tell Vic that, but Vic's kind of scared. And she's like, the fact of the matter is, every time we go up against Mr. Nobody, we never go full force because we're so scared of what he's going to use against us. And the fact is, Niles needs our help, and shouldn't we try at least a little harder for him? The fact is, she's saying that it will be okay in the end. It's like, how do you, she's like, he's like, do you even really believe that? And she's like, I do. She's kind of steadfast and firm, she found her conviction, and Cyborg's willing to help, but he's like, I can't beat her. I need to stay here with my dad. So she leaves, and I love Mr. Nobody being like, oh, good. Way to go, Rita. The fact of the matter is, this episode was very cathartic for you. And now, wait, there's more? Ugh. And so the team is united, and they're all going to work together to save Niles, in this for Niles. And I love him pausing at the end, and there's Mr. Nobody, covered in DC and Doom Patrol merch. I swear that's probably real merch, too. It's too good. It's too good. And he's walking by the poster of Doom Patrol and being like, wait a minute. And he rips off Cyborg's face. He's like, okay, that's better. And basically he's talking about the fact of the matter is, this is a superhero team I could get behind, I could use. And he's like, after 13 episodes of just meaningless character, blah, 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 we're finally getting to the show that everyone wanted, a superhero show. And he's like, I love it. And it's like the battle of good versus evil, heroes versus villain. And you villain, that's me. So if you want Niles, come and get me, So I think that's fascinating. Which does beg the question, what does he need the Doom Patrol for? Like, something must happen when, like, good versus evil clash or something like that. I'm curious, is Flex going to help in the fight? I mean, well, let me get to Flex's situation in a second. I'll go ahead and talk about it and kind of circle back to Mr. Nobody's situation. It's sad. I didn't realize that lady was actually Dolores. I thought that was all some, like, trap or whatever. Because it's sad, because obviously in the past, like, he was steadfast fighting against him, but the moment they threatened Dolores, and I think that's why he became so obsessed with that soap opera, because every time he watched the TV, it was him getting a chance to see his wife more and more, and then eventually they kind of once he lost his identity, it's like, oh, let's put on something, and like subconsciously, even though he was kind of lost, watching the TV was, that's why he broke down when the TV got broken, because it was his only connection to his wife to know that she was okay, and so, but him, obviously in the state he was in, he didn't really realize that. And it seems like it wasn't just him that got messed with, it was also Dolores. What exactly the Bureau of Normalcy, what they did to them at the ant farm, we don't know know, like they were assets being studied and stuff like that, but beyond that, we don't know if they were actually being used. In Dolores' case, it seems like they messed with her head, made her kind of like an agent with all of this. It's also interesting because even back then, like the Bureau of Normalcy, there was that cat that ended up sucking Flex up, and it turns out the kid was a part of it. He's like asset attained. So it's like, okay. So for one, it's like they're recruiting pretty young, but I guess it kind of has its benefits. But I wonder, is that like something they captured that allows them to do that, or was that cat actually like some high-tech technology? I have no idea. They wonder about like the entities and stuff like that aren't normal, like Danny or metahumans in that case, obviously. But it's like, what about technology? I mean, I guess Cyborg technically falls in that category of a metahuman, and I guess like he falls in that category of technology, but do they all handle technology like Cyborg like they would technically any other technology? If there's like some high-tech alien tech or something, would they go about taking it like that? I mean, they might take it and utilize it. They might not necessarily 100% lock it up like they would, well, metahumans and all these other people and things with powers and stuff. Nevertheless, it is sad that in the end, though, he's got reunited with Dolores. They're happy. They both remember everything, and it's like, she gets taken from him. I guess there was something implanted in her to make it so that if they ever found each other, she would die because of it. And just Flex just got her back and lost her, you know? So I kind of get the feeling like he might be motivated. Well, he might not be in the right mindset for this fight to come up, but we'll see. So on top of that, there is the whole situation of, like I said, them preparing for this battle. But the thing is, like, why does Mr. Nobody want them to need them? I don't know. Because obviously Niles is in a situation where he's kind of like, oh, don't underestimate the team, but do whatever you want to them. I'm not going to help you find that girl. And maybe this all feeds into itself because this is about finding that hairy girl. This is about facing, like I said, I feel like there has to be something. I guess for him, it's like in the grand scheme of things, it's this, you know, power struggle. Maybe it will release some energy or do something he needs to happen so that he can find what he needs. I have no idea. It is kind of interesting to see that it kind of comes down to this, because we are in like the last 2 episodes of the season. It's got only 15 episodes. I am curious whether it's going to be like a back-to-back episode type of thing next week, but I feel like it's probably just going to be like 1 episode a week. We'll see. I kind of feel like it's 1 a week, but we'll see. But I'm very interested to see what ends up happening in this clash, because obviously they're going to track the Beard Hunter, which it seemed like he fell into a trap of Mr. Nobody's, which now he's just used as bait to lure them into another trap, I guess. Maybe. I don't know. That's the crazy thing about the show. You're just not really quite sure how things are going to all play out, and I love it for it. So I'm very excited to see what the next episode has in store for us with all of this. And now moving on to the season premiere of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. A great premiere. I think they did a really great job kind of automatically kind of showing you everything right off the bat. It's kind of interesting because I think it's neat that they actually do skip forward a year. That the fact is we're not immediately picking up where season 5 left off in many different regards. But obviously everything with Coulson and everything, that's one thing. But even the search for Fitz, I do like it that it's not like, oh, it's not just a simple thing of like, oh, we can track him. It's like, no, he's lost in space. The whole point is to keep him hidden so that obviously he can be there in the future when the team needs him, obviously. So he needs to be well hidden for that. So it is kind of interesting. The only ones that are in space is Daisy, Simmons, Piper, and Davis, because the rest of the team, I guess it's like, we need to search for Fitz. Sure, we're not giving up, but the fact of the matter is we need to be here on Earth in case some stuff goes down. Everything that's going down currently, I wonder, did that happen before everyone left? Because the way Davis says it later on, they've been gone for months. So obviously it's been a year. So there was a year that they worked together as a team. But then Mac realizes, like, no, S.H.I.E.L.D. needs to be active on Earth to make sure everything kind of stays in line. And so obviously that's why him, May, Yo-Yo all ended up staying while the others ended up going. So it is kind of interesting to see. Well, for one, I was wondering about it, like when they get stopped by those people and then like they run Daisy's name because they're like, oh, she's acting so tough and everything, because she's like, oh, like Daisy's like, oh, you're gonna give me the money, your guys' money, so that we can pay for fuel. And she's like, and he's like, oh, you must be like the daughter of some like monarch or something. And then lo and behold, the scan shows that she's Quake. Side note, that's got to be new about Daisy controlling her powers. The fact that she just quaked their guns apart. Has she, her accuracy is like, because I don't know, like, has she ever, I'm trying to remember. Like, I guess because most times when she uses her powers, it's usually just literally knocking dudes out. So, but the other guys just ran away. So it's like, she's usually just using her power to, I don't know, that just seemed like that was like crazy ass control to be able to use her power to quake their guns apart like that. It was kind of interesting. I'm trying to think of her moment. She probably has done that before and I'm just blanking on it. But usually it's just kind of a powerful, like, boom, boom, knock you back type of thing. I mean, obviously she used her training from May to kind of take the main dude down. And I like kind of, you see, obviously we all know that Simmons definitely has a darker side, but obviously when it comes to finding Fitz, her telling that dude, like, oh yeah, we don't know what this effect's going to have on your body because, like, the gravity situation there is different. And saying that, like, oh, I really won't know what the effects are going to be until I cut open your corpse. It's like, Jesus, Simmons. To be fair, you know, it's her husband, well, technically just her boyfriend, because they got married when they came back to present day. So Fitz is still, even though he's her husband, technically he's just her boyfriend now, which that's going to be a whole conversation he has to get caught up on. That it's interesting. There's a lot of stuff he has to relearn, will be informed about, that includes the whole Deacon situation. But nevertheless, which, speaking of the whole Fitz situation, it is interesting because it does seem like the ship got attacked. By who necessarily? I don't know. Who would go out of their way to attack them and why? Not unless someone knew that that was Fitz specifically. So not like if it was a specific attack, or was it because it was like, no one should have been able to find them because they were so low radar. Obviously, no one ever found them in the original timeline, but because they came back in time, things have changed. The ship got attacked. They were able to find like the other half of the ship initially, but then they found the other half, the ones that's supposed to have Fitz. But sadly, the chamber is empty. So he was in there, but now he's gone. And obviously, you see Simmons kind of broken up about it. Like, you know, and the conversation between Piper and Daisy, I thought was kind of interesting, where Piper was like, yeah, like, well, because Daisy was like, the fact is that Simmons has, you know, never let doubt creep into her mind, because it's like, yeah, because if she did, she'd basically fall apart. You know, so the hope to finding Fitz and believing, no, everything's going to work out, I'm going to find him, is what kept her going. And even to the point, like, she was laying inside the chamber just to feel like this is where he was. I'm so close yet so far away, you know? But I was also, you know, something else had crossed my mind. This is what I meant to talk about too. It's like, the fact is they knew who Daisy was. I'm like, there's no way her name's like that, like intergalactic or whatever. So I was wondering how that is, but it's like, no, Daisy's made a point to kind of make herself seem scary and kind of causing some problems, because the Confederacy has been tracking them down, and if she makes herself seem bigger and stronger, like they're not to be messed with, they're less likely to challenge her. She even talks about it later on. It's like, that's my philosophy, because there's only 4 of us on the ship, and like, you know, that's what Simmons' response was. But Daisy was like, that's the point. They don't need to know there's only 4 of us on the ship, so I need to show them a show of strength. Because it's like, oh, like, so, because Daisy's made a point that wherever she goes, she causes a little mayhem and destruction, because that means people are less likely to mess with them. And that's why when all she did was break their guns, everyone ran away. It's like, oh, we're not about to deal with Quake. It's Quake, you know? I wonder if that World Destroyer thing is kind of followed. I mean, to be fair, that was in the future, but I'm wondering in some shape or form, has that titling kind of followed her into space or whatever? I mean, it wasn't really a thing on Earth, like obviously present day, but still. Like I said, the whole conversation, it seems that she just caused enough damage to kind of scare people and then be like, oh, she's kind of a terror, so that's interesting. It is interesting that well, I guess that's kind of the whole point of the MCU, because we're kind of going on that more cosmic level, like with Captain Marvel, everything with the Guardians of the Galaxy and stuff like that. Thor and all that kind of deals on a more cosmic scale, and potentially going forward, the MCU is going to be more about that with like what I've been hearing, you know, people talk about is like the Eternals and everything going forward. Like, it's a whole thing, but it's just kind of interesting to think about that. It's also interesting too, because like dealt with time travel and stuff last season. You know, Endgame ends up, spoilers, deal with time travel. Sorry if that's a spoiler for anyone. Nevertheless, it is that situation of like, obviously, like Simmons is desperate to find Fitz, and she's like, oh, he's deeper in space, but Daisy's like, we can't be doing that because we don't know how many jumps we got left, and the fact of the matter is we're unprepared for this, you know, because you have Piper and Davis, you know, it's like Simmons is like, no, let's do it, and then it's like Davis puts his foot down and is like, no, we're not going to do that, and it's like, for him, it's like the whole conversation comes up of he's got a kid who he hasn't seen in months. It's like we're run thin, because even Daisy was like, the fact is, thanking Piper, because it's like you and Davis decided to stick along with this. Like, you didn't know what you were necessarily getting yourselves into, but you still, regardless, kind of stuck it with us, and I appreciate that. So I thought it was pretty dope. Also, I love the fact is Davis and Piper talk so much shit about each other. Like, oh, he's like, oh, if we were on the ship any longer, Piper's like, there would have been you would have found a body. Like, I would have ended up killing Davis. And he's like, oh, the fact is, you would have found a body, because I would have already killed myself having to deal with you. And then there's that whole thing of like, Oh, I bet they haven't found, I don't think they found us. And he's like, yeah, but you're not the best judge of character. You're not the best person to know that because you're actually dumb as bricks. And she's smiling and she's like, I'm willing to bet money on it. And he's like, the only reason why you're willing to bet money on it is because even if they do find us, we'll be dead, so you won't have to pay. She's like, see, you're catching one. It's like that back and forth between them. I'm like, is there something there between them? Like, or is that just like, nah, we're good buddies? I even love at one point, he's like, referring to her as sidekick. It's like, dude, I didn't remember their dynamic being like that. I wonder if it just being stuck with each other for like months on end kind of builds that bond where you just like enjoy talking shit to each other like that. I loved it. Obviously, the Confederacy ends up attacking them, but they were supposed to be going back to Earth, but Simmons, desperate to save Fitz, decides, hey, I'm not going to do that, so they're going deeper into space. It's interesting because we do see Fitz at like the end of the episode. I'm assuming that's him injecting himself with something because he wants to appear human. I'm sure if he appears to be Terran out in space, that's going to draw a lot of attention. So I'm assuming it's like wherever he is, because obviously he's either probably just working so that he can, because like the whole thought process that Simmons had was the fact is of like, oh, I'm going to go, that Fitz would go to this place because so he can find himself another cryo chamber to kind of be frozen in. And I think maybe either he's working that debt off or getting money to do that, or he's hiding, or whatever the case may be. I'm assuming that's what that whole situation is supposed to represent. Like, okay, I can't be a Terran. I can't be a human. I got to be something else, so we'll see whether or not that ends up being the case. But obviously, that's just dealing with the space stuff. There's also everything on Earth. You have Mac, running the team and everything. Interestingly enough, obviously, like, listening to some advice, like, messages left from Coulson, because there was a part of him that's like, yeah, I kind of keep listening to him because he's almost afraid to stop listening to him because it's just a thing of, like, because I think in some shape or form, it probably almost keeps Coulson alive in his heart. But there's also a thing of, like, yeah, because he doesn't really trust himself. He's not a full, sure leader yet. He thinks, like, oh, I still need Coulson's advice. I need his guidance here. Like, this is kind of the position I'm in, but he's not 100% cemented in his position. Also, interesting faces popped up a part of the team. The actor who plays Fox, he looks so familiar, but I just don't remember or know what it is I know him from. I definitely know who the actor who plays Killer. I was like, because I thought I saw his name, but it didn't click in my head until I saw his face. I was like, that's freaking Lucas Bryant. It's freaking Nathan from Haven. I was like, what? Also, turns out there's something between him and Yo-Yo. Now, that's pretty interesting. It's like, well, because the way Yo-Yo puts it, it's like Matt kind of thrusting himself into the job and everything. But the fact is that it wasn't everyone he shut the door on. It was mainly her. Because everything she did last season, like, she crossed a lot of lines that she wasn't, she was so desperate to save, the world. She did a lot of, she did some pretty bad stuff, and it's not she wanted to work through things, but Mac wasn't really willing to. So I'm wondering, is that going to stick, or it's actually kind of sad just because, like, they've been there's always been that flirtatious relationship they had, and then they grew into something more. Like, didn't Yo-Yo get introduced in like season 3? Like, that's always been, they were always kind of a thing. It's like, hey, and it's just to see them end up the way they are is kind of sad. But it is kind of sweet having May giving, Yo-Yo kind of some advice of being like, don't be afraid. Kind of basically don't waste time, especially the time she spent with Coulson. It made her realize, like, oh, you don't want to be wasting time, which is like, you would never think like May would kind of give advice like that, but it's just, things changed, obviously. It's like when you have a limited amount of time to spend with the person you love, it kind of changes your perspective on a lot of things. And I thought it's kind of neat. For her, it's like, you don't need to worry about, Mac. He's a grown adult and everything like that, because it's like, you don't have to, like, defend it or, protect his feelings. Obviously, Yo-Yo wants to take things between her and Keller very slowly, but it's like, no, the reason why she's like, I'm doing it for me and not because of Mac. And I look at her being like, well, yeah, but, also I wouldn't want to, do that either because, Max, he's not small, and being like, also I respect him too much that I'm like, we should tell him because I'd rather us tell him than him find out on his own. So that's kind of an interesting thing. It's just interesting to see things kind of play out like that. I was curious where they were going to stand. Like, just like I said, it's that whole thing of like a year time skip. You got a lot to kind of catch up on. Whether it's probably going to be stuff where it's probably like, they probably won't go in exact details. They'll probably mention, reference stuff here and there, but it probably won't be that significant enough to be like, okay. What also comes into question, and this is something I brought up in my thoughts and theories, like now, like this is, I'd made that before I'd seen Endgame. So now, Endgame wise, spoilers for Endgame, I'm sorry, but the whole conversation is there was obviously the 5-year time skip in, Endgame. It's like, well, what time frame is this? I'm assuming this is like probably before well, no, because like Infinity War took place during Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Season 5. That was like kind of a thing. They're like, oh, did you see that stuff that's going down in New York? That's what so at least not unless that was something I'm completely misinterpreted. But the question then becomes like, is this year one of after the snap or what? Like, is that even more reason why they're doing what they're doing? Because it's like half the population went away. We got to help out whatever way we can. Like, obviously there's a difference between the movies and the TV shows, but the TV show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. in particular still does pull from the movies. So I'm curious to see how they handle that situation. Like, because it doesn't seem like it's the way the world looks and everything. It doesn't seem full-blown Endgame yet of like, oh, it's been 5 years. It seems like it's probably still pretty fresh. The conversation hasn't come up, so it's like, I don't know. Like I said, that might be something they're like, actually, we're not even going to tackle that at all. It is what it is. I don't know. It's something to kind of keep in mind. But nevertheless, so it seems like they're tracking some, and I love this thing that they're basically like, oh yeah, anomalies, can we call them that? And May's like, we literally used that word too much last season. We're not calling these anomalies, but it's like people coming out of portals. Like in this particular case, it's this dude named Jocko, and like his friend ended up kind of crossing through, but he ended up kind of getting stuck partway through a wall and kind of dies like that. So that's interesting. Like, so that in my mind kind of pushes the whole, maybe we are dealing with a alternate universe type of deal. Like, there's a whole thing of like, oh, maybe they're aliens, but I'm like, I think we're dealing with a multiverse situation, kind of like an alternate universe, which does beg the question of like, because there's the whole conversation based on the trailers, and there's more spoilers for Spider-Man Far From Home. It's like, oh, there's a multiverse, if that, in case, like, stuff has popped up, it'd be like, hey, just in case if that doesn't end up being a lie or whatever. But if that's the case, like the snap did that, but it's like, which snap? I brought it up before. There's been 4 snaps. So maybe the first one, especially if we're still in that year period, that, it's like, well, technically at this point in time, if because there's like 20 some days after Infinity War was Endgame. So that would mean at this point there was like 2 snaps, so there was the one Thanos used to destroy the Infinity Stone. So maybe, that begs the question. Once again, depends on if Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is tackling that or not. But either way, it's really interesting because their whole crossing thing, I guess they have to come out specific areas, but if you end up coming through an object in this world, there's a chance for things to kind of glitch, and you could literally kind of end up phasing through an object. It's kind of like teleporting, like, if you're not careful, you can literally teleport yourself into a wall, part of your body kind of trapped, and kind of end up killing yourself like that. I think it's kind of a similar thing in that regard. So there's also the whole conversation about the ley lines and everything like that. That's obviously going to play a big part because that's how this whole situation plays out of like, oh yeah, like where these crossing points are. I guess it's kind of like that sweet spot between realms or worlds that kind of allow people to kind of punch through. The fact is they were literally driving in the truck makes me go, yeah, it's definitely, I didn't think about that at the time when I was talking about the trailer. It's like, yeah, that definitely don't seem alien-like. The fact is that the truck was there too when they punched through. So it's like, it seems more so like another dimension type of situation. Maybe not. Which is interesting. Once again, it comes to that whole conversation of that's happening on Earth. Like, once again, who's the one that attacked Fitz in space if it wasn't them? If it was, but if it was them, why would they? There's a lot of questions in that regard. So hopefully Agent Fox isn't dead, but he did get shot. So there's probably a good chance of that, which is kind of a shame. I'm also skipped over it too. They are trying to build out their ranks a lot more too. They're trying to obviously compensate for the fact that they don't have Simmons and Fitz. It's like, we've got the muscle to cover things good, but we don't have the brains. So they get Martin Benson, that actor, I know his name. You've seen that actor has been in so much stuff, but I'm blanking on his name. I don't think I've ever really known it, but he's one of those actors and you're like, oh, I know this dude. You've seen him in so many different things. It's kind of interesting because he's apparently he's someone May knows through Andrew. And for him, is that something that a lot of people are talking about too? Is like, they're like, May's been talking a lot more too. It's like, even Yo-Yo is like, kind of like, wow, you're talking a lot about this. Like, conversations, like, cause even like Andrew, Benson being like, in a time she was married to Andrew, he never heard her talk this much and stuff. It's kind of like, yeah, like May's kind of come out of her shell subsequently, And so Benson's supposed to be kind of the head of kind of like finding a new team of Brainiacs. They need to find some smart people to figure things out. I am curious to know whether there's the group that has found their way here, whether 100% are they like humans or are they something else? I'm not sure, you know. They appear pretty human because one girl kind of like cuts herself and she's bleeding, but to be fair, that don't mean stuff, anything. Just because you have red blood doesn't mean you're necessarily human. You could just mean that you're a human with something special. I mean, they haven't really shown themselves to be anything. They just seem like normal, just well-trained people, potentially. It's kind of interesting too because Fox is like, wait, you're part of S.H.I.E.L.D. when he saw the Sarge who looks like Coulson. That begs that question of like, do you like, I mean, obviously, like, probably like, you know, Coulson was obviously before your time. So it's like, oh, you probably don't recognize him as like, oh, he was Phil Coulson, head director of S.H.I.E.L.D. for a good chunk of time. So maybe that's, regardless, it was just kind of interesting. And they do manage to get away, sadly, but you do see May looking at the fact is, I was like, wait, that's Coulson. The fact is, you know, we still don't 100% know how much time May had with Coulson. Because the fact is, the conversation was like, oh, he was going to have either a couple days, if he's lucky, a couple weeks. We don't know exactly how much time he had, but it seems like it's coming upon that year anniversary of him dying, so that's something that's going to be tackled with. But also, like, May probably going to have to inform the team. It's like, that dude looked so much like Coulson. Not just looked like Coulson. He was Coulson, you know? So, once again, I brought it up. Like, my thoughts about that, once again, have been like, oh, this has got to be some, like, once again, multiverse situation. But yet again, I don't know if Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is going down that route. So I'm interested to see where that all goes. I was actually kind of surprised about the whole, like, oh, Simmons kind of pushing them to go on adventures in space. Because I was thinking, like, oh, they're going to go back home and kind of deal with that. Because I think there is, I won't say. Just because I'm referencing stuff that's kind of like, yeah, that's probably in the trailer that maybe some people didn't watch. So I don't want to spoil anything. So I'm not. I was just actually surprised, like, oh, we're going to get more space adventures. Which I'm interested in to kind of explore space more here in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. It's so interesting. It's always kind of been like a smaller thing. And obviously as the series is going on, it's become a much bigger and something that they expand upon a little bit more, which is just kind of interesting. I never would have thought the show would have like the many space adventures that it kind of has, you know? It's just interesting. But like I said, I'm very interested to see where all this is going to end up taking us in the next episode. See if we get any more answers towards figuring this whole thing out, who these people are, you know? Is it just going to be these people? Are they just like the reconnaissance crew? Like, the fact is that, you know, quote-unquote, Sarge is here. Makes you go, okay, for him to come himself, are they the only ones left? Are they all that's needed? Are they trying to find a more permanent means to get the rest of their team here if there is another team or group or whatever? I don't know. We'll ultimately have to wait and see what the next episode has in store for us. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.